What if I told you the Soviet Union built submarines so massive they could carry entire tank battalions, hundreds of troops, and even fighter aircraft, all while remaining completely undetected beneath the ocean's surface? How did Stalin's engineers design underwater invasion platforms that could surface through 4 meters of Arctic ice and deploy a full armored assault force in minutes? You're going to hear all that and more through the incredible story of the Soviet Union's secret weapon program, amphibious assault submarines designed to bring World War III directly to America's doorstep. The inspiration came from desperation during the siege of Sevastopol. During World War II's darkest hours, the Soviet Union discovered that submarines could shuttle weapons, supplies, and special forces into the besieged city, keeping supply lines hidden from Nazi surface weapons. This underwater lifeline proved to be a game changer, helping turn the tide of war through near-perfect secrecy. But Soviet military planners realized they had a fundamental problem in the emerging Cold War. While America and its allies surrounded them, the USSR couldn't reach the continental United States. The Atlantic was too vast, and any attempt to move an invasion fleet across it would be detected and destroyed long before reaching American shores. What if submarines could carry not just supplies and small teams, but entire invasion forces, complete with tanks, aircraft, and hundreds of combat troops? The concept seemed like science fiction, but by 1948 the USSR was deadly serious about making it reality. In 1948, the Soviet Union launched Project 621, a landing ship transport submarine that would dwarf anything the world had ever seen. At 5,950 tons displacement, this underwater giant was powered by steam gas turbines, chosen specifically for maximum submerged endurance over nuclear alternatives that weren't yet available. With a maximum surface speed of 15 knots and 8.4 knots underwater, it could travel 6,000 miles on the surface. This wasn't just a submarine, it was a complete invasion platform, carrying a full infantry battalion of 745 troops, 10 T-35 tanks, 12 trucks, 12 towed cannons, and 3 catapult-launched La-5 fighter aircraft, complete with launching mechanisms. The aircraft carrier capability meant Soviet forces could have air cover immediately upon landing. The deployment method was equally audacious. The submarine would approach an enemy shoreline, surface unexpectedly, and rest on the beach's bottom while filling rear ballast tanks to tilt the front upward. Troops and vehicles would then charge over the bow ramp directly onto enemy soil. Imagine defenders suddenly facing a full armored assault emerging from the sea itself. Project 621's execution had critical flaws. The submarine lacked sufficient room for a full infantry battalion to travel 6,000 miles. There was only one bunk bed for every 4 people, creating hot bunking so extreme you could literally cook dinner under the covers from body heat. The exhaust system couldn't handle multiple machines operating simultaneously during offloading, creating potentially lethal fume buildup. By 1952, the USSR pivoted to an even bolder concept, a submarine capable of traveling through solid ice to strike where enemies least expected. By 1952, both superpowers realized the Arctic would be ruled by submarines, and the Soviets believed an amphibious assault submarine could give them the decisive edge. Enter Project 626, the under-ice transport submarine, designed to deploy troops in polar regions while supporting air surveillance and communications in the Arctic basin. At 348 tons and 100 meters long, this submarine featured a revolutionary figure-8 cross-section with 2 main levels split into compartments. The rear upper level housed 2 torpedo tubes with 4 torpedoes for limited engagement capability, while the engine room below contained 2 2,000 horsepower engines driving a single propeller for speeds of 12 knots on the surface and 8 knots underwater. But the real innovation was in the middle. Instead of a forward ramp, Project 626 featured a central lift system that could move tanks and troops vertically through the conning tower. This eliminated the need for vulnerable beach landings, allowing the submarine to deploy forces anywhere ice could be found. The front cargo hold stored armor and troops, while underneath lay the main batteries and a self-repelling system fastened into the superstructure after the main command deck. Project 626's mission profile was extraordinary. The submarine could carry 5 tanks, fuel, ammunition, and 65 commandos for polar operations. The conning tower was heated to melt through ice up to 4 meters thick, allowing surface deployment anywhere. Western forces operating in the Arctic could suddenly see ice cracking nearby. Before they could react, a submarine would break through, deploying tanks and elite troops while 25mm anti-aircraft guns provided cover. A fully equipped assault force would appear in supposedly impassable terrain within minutes. Soviet planners believed these submarines could capture Allied airfields on ice surfaces, then refuel Soviet bombers for missions against North America. But there was still one problem limiting these designs: power. The available technology made them slow and fuel-hungry. Fortunately for Soviet ambitions, a revolutionary new power source had arrived: atomic energy. And if nuclear power required a bigger submarine, well, bigger was exactly what they had in mind. In August 1967, the USSR began work on Project 717, their ultimate strategic submarine. With 11,000 tons displacement, this underwater platform would carry 20 amphibious tanks, 60 armored personnel carriers, and 470 troops stored in double-deck holds contained on both sides of the main hull, creating a unique triple-shell cross-section. Project 717 combined transport with combat capabilities. The rear housed nuclear reactors and engine room, with plenty of storage for supplies, plus a special mine production facility that could build and deploy sea mines without surfacing, essentially a floating weapons factory. The conning tower was unusually long, featuring anti-aircraft cannons kept in sealable hull modules and a special rescue chamber for emergencies. The front section reveals the full scope of Soviet vision. Twin bow ramps on either side allowed simultaneous tank deployments, while special bow ballast systems in the middle enabled beach landings. 6 torpedo tubes carried 18 to 20 torpedoes, plus surface-to-air missiles provided comprehensive defense. This floating military base was missing only nuclear ICBMF to be complete. Engineering this complexity required multiple 3D models with rearrangeable components to test configurations. Scale versions were built for fluid dynamic testing. Soviet planners envisioned 5 vessels capable of challenging American naval dominance globally. By March 1972, the technical project was complete and construction was ready to begin. The plan called for 5 of these underwater behemoths to create a mini-fleet capable of projecting Soviet power globally. But geopolitics would kill the dream before it could become reality. The nuclear proliferation agreements with the United States limited the number of nuclear-powered military machines, including submarines. The Soviet Union's single plant capable of building these colossal ships was under heavy Western scrutiny, making construction politically impossible. Faced with limited nuclear allocations, the USSR chose to focus on strategic missile submarines like the massive Typhoon class as responses to America's Trident program. The dream of creating massive amphibious transport submarines was abandoned, leaving only blueprints and models as evidence of what might have been the most ambitious submarine program in history. The United States wasn't completely blind to these possibilities. In the 1950s, American designers conceived a 10,000-ton submarine measuring 220 meters long with a 38-meter beam, an underwater behemoth designed to accommodate 2,240 Marines and deploy them through amphibious flying platforms, though the exact propulsion method for these platforms was never specified in the classified documents. But while American concepts existed on paper, they never reached the scale or development level of the ambitious Soviet programs. The US Navy's approach remained focused on traditional naval superiority and air power projection, leaving the Soviets as the undisputed masters of underwater invasion platform design. The irony is profound. America's dominance over Atlantic shipping lanes and airspace forced the Soviets to develop the most innovative submarine designs in history. In trying to work around American naval superiority, they created concepts that could have revolutionized underwater warfare forever. Today, these Soviet submarine projects remain among the most ambitious military designs ever conceived. Project 717 pushed engineering boundaries, creating underwater vessels that functioned as complete military bases rather than simple transports. The complexity was so extreme that engineers had to physically build and test multiple scale prototypes just to understand how the systems would work together. Had these submarines been built, no coastline would have been safe from surprise assault. The ability to deploy hundreds of troops, dozens of tanks, and complete logistical support anywhere on Earth while remaining undetected could could have fundamentally altered Cold War dynamics. A single Project 717 submarine could have deployed more firepower than many small nations possessed, all while remaining virtually undetectable until the moment of attack. Instead, these projects remain fascinating glimpses into Soviet military thinking, examples of how strategic constraints can drive innovation to extraordinary lengths. The monster submarines that could have invaded America exist now only as blueprints and models, monuments to underwater empires that were simply too vast to become reality. Okay, that's all I got for this one. This was definitely one of the coolest things I've researched in a while. Now, if you want to see another colossal Russian engineering project, I suggest you check out this story about the My-26. The only thing is, this one got blown out of the sky and became the worst helicopter tragedy ever recorded. Check it out next.